Countless hours, crashes, and 40 episodes later we finally reached the 100k population mark, and I thought it's time for a little showcase. So if you want to see what the most realistic city I've ever built in a city builder game looks like, stay around and come with me on a tour where I show you everything we've built so far in more detail. Where should we start? Good question. The best place is where we started the series in the first place, I think. So the entire bay here of the city is very industrially influenced. That's why we started the first episode with a coal power plant, a grain silo, and a huge oil and container port. However, the first build was this coal power generation station to supply the whole city with electricity, and we also placed a water pumping station for the water delivery and a cargo train terminal so that the coal could be delivered directly by train or ship, of course. In the beginning, we filled in 1 tile per episode, but later on in the series, I threw this concept overboard because it was quite limiting. Let me know if we should continue with the 1 tile concept. Next to the power station, at the waterfront, there is a corridor with multiple rail tracks for regional rail traffic, but also for cargo trains and metro service that connects the later suburbs with the city center and vice versa. The metro line also splits into 2 different directions here, so we also have a few cool bridge structures here. We also have an expressway that runs along the hillside, and this is one of the main entry roads to the city to connect it with the outside world. We then continued with a huge grain silo where trains loaded with grain and wheat from the surrounding agricultural areas can load their freight onto ships and export it. We also have these large silos here on the waterfront and a turning circle where trains can also turn around as they can't go any further in the one direction here. Along the harbor, we also have high voltage power lines that distribute the electricity from the power station to the city. There is also a complex highway interchange above a metro station, and the metro station serves directly one of my highlights of the city, namely the baseball stadium. This is where the Fort Francia Bay Otters play, which is a pretty successful MLB team in my imaginary world. Let me know if you can tell which stadium this custom-made ballpark here is inspired by. Of course, a city doesn't just consist of industry, and we were pretty close to bankruptcy anyway back then because we had all the expensive infrastructure but hardly any inhabitants. So it was time to place the first residential buildings, businesses and office towers. Here we have one of the 2 downtown cores. This one is built on the edge of the hill and the terrain was definitely very challenging. To get some history into the city, we also built this star-shaped fort, which is high above the city and gives the whole bay its name. It's very much inspired by the fort in Quebec City, and we also have a historical old town underneath as well. I always made sure that every part of the city is well connected to the citywide metro system. I really enjoyed building the above ground lines in particular, and on my TikTok you can see some first-person rides as well. After that there were also a few social housing complexes missing, which we built here along the cliff next to the river. There we have sports facilities and a swimming pool for the citizens. The natural highlight of the city is of course these impressive waterfalls, which are one of the biggest tourist attractions in the entire region and a natural wonder of the world. The city is built right to the edge of the waterfalls, and the district above also has excellent public transport connections with this curved station, where regional trains as well as metro trains stop. Another large part of the region's energy supply is this hydroelectric power plant, which uses the river and the gradient to generate massive amounts of electricity, theoretically. The city has some very hilly landscapes, and a huge reservoir was built in the middle of a mountain, which is held in place by a rock dam. This is mainly used to supply and store drinking water to the region. However, the city's real dam powers the metro area with energy, so there are also high voltage power lines that start at the transformer station next to the dam and run right through the city past houses, hills and forests. This area here can be described in part as suburban, but we also have 4 apartment blocks above a metro station, so it's a transport-oriented development, so to speak. The city also has several arenas. This one is a field hockey and basketball arena right next to the highway, which is also covered with buildings here. This is one of the main traffic arteries and ends in a spaghetti junction that connects the highways in all possible directions. Up north, the highway is located in a trench and is crossed by several railroad tracks, which also pass a train maintenance yard for all the commuter trains along the way. This area is again quite industrial, so we have large factories partly near this half-dried up river, which later ends in a small barrage where the city center begins. As I have already mentioned, the bay is very industrial in contrast to the seafront, so we find a very large harbor here, but also shipyards, where ships of various sizes are built. We also have a waste-to-energy plant and of course a lot of rail infrastructure for all the freight trains. Maybe it's a bit too much industry at the end of the day, but I'm trying to make the city work well in terms of the game mechanics too. So we also need a lot of industry and offices for all the inhabitants, so that the unemployment rate always stays low and the city is a thriving industrial center. Many residents live near the city center in medium density areas. But we also have large project housing estates, some of which are very inspired by New York, and to create the transition from these medium density zones to the city center, I have also built another huge arena, namely the Superdome. Still with the old logo though, the dome is also very close to the central station and next to the rail corridor, which bundles all the tracks from all different directions to the track apron of the central station, including a cool flyover structure for the metro tracks. Of course, the metro infrastructure is not neglected either, so we have a metro station right across the highway here, which is perfectly accessible from both neighborhoods on each side of the highway that cuts them in half. All around we have a mix of high-rise buildings and historic buildings that blend in really well together. Now we come to the city center, which is characterized by an impressive skyline with many office skyscrapers, but is also very pedestrian friendly, with streetcar lines leading everywhere and pedestrian bridges and zones to all the office towers. It was very important to me that the city center has a good mix of transport, road and pedestrian infrastructure. The people can either park underground or in these huge parking garages distributed all over the city core. Next to the city center is the beginning of a large park that will stretch for several kilometers into the outskirts of the city. Here we have, among other things, a popular tourist attraction, namely the Ferris wheel, which has been placed above a large road to minimize the impact of this expressway. We also have the National Art Gallery and 2 beaches with a volleyball court by the water close by, so that you can cool off in the water during a hot summer day. On the other side of the river are residential buildings along the hillside, which are very much inspired by the layout and geography of Genoa in Italy. There is a mix of high apartment towers, prefabricated panel buildings and detached houses on the hillside. Over on this side is also the home to the city's university hospital, which has a direct metro connection via a metro line that winds its way through the city and the hills. There is also a public outdoor pool located near the hospital on the edge of the park, which is a popular summer retreat for residents, and we have also started to build a wealthy neighborhood with a very expensive mansion as the main focal point in the middle. There are always little things hidden in the city, like this basketball court, for example. Here and in general, I also made sure that there are a few parks where people can spend time in the green. What do you think? Does this look like a dream city or more like an industrial shithole? You can decide. In any case, I can't wait to continue building the city, and I hope you'll join me on this journey. If you want to explore everything yourself, I can only warmly recommend that you visit my Patreon page. There you will find access to the save games of every newest edition, but also mod lists and the graphic settings to make the game look as beautiful as shown in these clips. Thank you so much for watching, and huge thanks to my Patreon supporters and for the incredible support for this series. Bye bye.